I always believed that marriage meant safety. That once you say I do, you're no longer alone in this world. That your partner becomes your shield, your home. For years, that's exactly what I thought I had with my husband, Mark. He was charming, respectful, and had this calmness about him that made you feel everything was going to be okay. He was the kind of man who held your hand in public, checked in during the day just to say he loved you, and made our friends believe we had the perfect relationship. And for a long time, I believed it too. But looking back now, I realize that some dangers don't come from strangers. Sometimes, the people you trust most are the ones who cause the deepest harm. It started small. Subtle. I noticed a shift in how he looked at me, more distracted, less present. At first, I blamed stress. Work had been tough on him, and I tried to be supportive. But the excuses grew. Late nights became normal. Locked phones. Cold silences in place of bedtime talks. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. We had years of memories, inside jokes, shared dreams. I thought we were just in a rough patch. Then one day, everything began to unravel. It was supposed to be a quiet evening. He said he had to work late, so I decided to surprise him at the office with his favorite takeout. Something sweet, something simple, just a small reminder that I still cared. But when I got there, he wasn't alone. He wasn't working. And he wasn't being the man I thought he was. That moment, seeing him so casually close to another woman, laughing, leaning in, brushing her hand like it meant nothing, froze me in place. I didn't confront him then. I just left, numb, takeout still in hand. I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding. That I saw something out of context. But deep down, I knew the truth had just knocked on the door I'd been afraid to open. From that night on, my life began to shift. I started watching him differently. Listening more carefully. And what I found broke something inside me. This wasn't just a mistake or a one-time betrayal. It was deeper than that. There were secrets I hadn't even begun to uncover. And the worst part? The betrayal didn't stop at infidelity. It went beyond another woman. It touched things I never imagined he was capable of. The man who promised to protect me had become the very person I needed protection from. But how do you walk away from someone you've built your life around? How do you choose yourself when everything in your world is tied to someone else? What happened next changed everything. And what I found in the days that followed would not only expose the truth, but force me to make the hardest decision of my life. The days after that office visit felt like I was living someone else's life. I went through the motions, making breakfast, replying to emails, folding laundry, but nothing felt real. Every time Mark spoke to me, I felt like I was staring at a stranger. He still kissed me goodbye in the morning and asked about my day in the evening, but all I could think about was that moment in his office, the way he smiled at her. Like I didn't exist. I started noticing more things. His cologne lingering even when he hadn't left the house. Calls he'd take in another room, his voice soft but serious. His phone never left his side anymore. It used to sit on the kitchen counter, face up, while we cooked dinner together. Now, it was always face down or in his pocket. And when I asked questions, innocent ones, like how was work, or who were you texting? His answers were vague, almost rehearsed. Something had changed, and I could feel it in my bones. We had been married for almost 7 years. Our wedding was small but beautiful. I wore my grandmother's necklace and he cried when I walked down the aisle. He wasn't just my husband, he was my best friend. We had gone through so much together, losing his dad, me switching careers, moving cities, and we always leaned on each other. That's why it was so hard to accept what was happening. It didn't feel like something he could do. Not to me. Not to us. But the signs were all there. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. Late one night, while he was in the shower, I picked up his phone. My hands were shaking. I didn't even know what I was looking for, I just knew I had to look. But he had changed his password. It had always been our anniversary. Now, it wasn't. That moment confirmed everything I had been afraid of. He wasn't just hiding something, he was protecting it. And then came the message. It popped up on my iPad, which was still synced to his phone from months ago. I wasn't even trying to snoop at that point. I was reading an email, and suddenly I saw her name. A short message. Just one line. I missed last night already. My heart dropped. And that's when I realized this wasn't some emotional affair or a confused phase. It was real. Ongoing. And maybe even worse than I imagined. But what I didn't know then was that this woman, she wasn't just anyone. She was someone close. Too close. And the truth about who she was would flip everything I thought I knew upside down. That message haunted me. I kept reading it over and over, trying to understand what it truly meant. Was it just flirting? Or had something actually happened the night before? And if so, where was I while he was with her? The question kept spinning in my head like a storm I couldn't stop. I didn't sleep that night. I just laid there beside him, his back turned, while the weight of betrayal pressed against my chest like a heavy stone. The next morning, I tried to act normal. Made him coffee like I always did. Kissed him goodbye. But inside, I was breaking. I knew I couldn't keep pretending, so I started digging. Quietly. Carefully. I didn't want to accuse him without proof, even though the truth was already tearing me apart. I needed more than a single message. I needed to know how far this had gone, who she really was, and how long it had been happening. It didn't take long. A few old receipts, a hotel confirmation buried deep in his email, and a name that made my stomach drop, Rachel. Rachel wasn't a stranger. She was part of our circle. A friend of mine, someone I had once trusted. She had been at our house for dinner more than once. She had smiled at me across the table while they shared inside jokes I thought were harmless. Now, every one of those moments replayed in my mind with new meaning. The way she hugged him a little too long. The glances. The laughs. It was all there, and I had been too blind to see it. And that's when something in me shifted. It wasn't just about his betrayal anymore. It was about both of them. The lies weren't just coming from inside my marriage, they had seeped into my friendships, my home, my everyday life. I started replaying every conversation I'd ever had with her, looking for signs. Did she pity me? Did she feel guilty? Or did she enjoy it, sneaking around, playing both sides, knowing I had no idea? I wanted answers. I needed to understand how two people who were supposed to care about me could lie so easily. But how do you confront something like that when your whole world feels like it's cracking under your feet? Do you face it head on, or wait until you're stronger? I wasn't ready for the confrontation. Not yet. But I knew it was coming. And when it did, nothing would be the same again. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think straight. Every sound, every text notification, every look from Mark made my skin crawl. The truth was sitting there, like a weight pressing on my chest, but I still hadn't said a word. I was living with a man who didn't know I knew. And somehow, that gave me power, but it also made every moment feel like I was walking through fire. I started watching their patterns. Rachel wasn't just some fling, she was part of our life. I saw how often she commented on his posts, how easily she made excuses to drop by, even when I was home. She acted so casual, but now I could see the cracks. The nervous smiles. The way she avoided eye contact. And Mark? He played it cool. Too cool. Like someone who had rehearsed this lie more than once. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I planned. I started journaling everything, dates, times, details. I screenshotted messages, saved copies of receipts, and kept them hidden. I didn't know what I was going to do with all of it yet, but I knew I needed to protect myself. I felt like I was collecting evidence in a case where I was both the detective and the victim. One evening, Mark told me he had a work retreat coming up. Just 2 days, nothing serious. He mentioned it casually, like it was normal. But something about his tone was too smooth. Too prepared. My gut told me this wasn't work-related at all. So, I smiled and nodded like I believed him, but inside, I knew this was it. I waited until he left. Then, I checked his location. I hadn't tracked him in months, but I still had access. What I saw made my heart stop. He wasn't out of town. He was at a cabin just a few miles away. The same one we had once visited together during our anniversary weekend. And my name was still on the booking confirmation. I sat in the silence of our home, heart racing. I could feel it, this was the moment everything would come to the surface. The lies, the betrayal, the years I spent trusting someone who had been lying to my face. I knew where he was. I knew who he was with. And I knew I had a choice to make. What happened next would decide everything. I stared at the screen, still unable to believe what I was seeing. Mark hadn't even left the city. The so-called retreat was just another excuse, another carefully crafted lie. And the cabin? It wasn't just a random getaway, it was our place. A spot filled with memories, laughter, promises. I could still picture the fireplace, the view of the lake, the silly photos we took under that old wooden sign. And now he was there again, with her. My hands trembled as I grabbed my keys. I didn't have a plan. I just needed to see it with my own eyes, even if it shattered me completely. The drive felt longer than it should have, every mile filled with racing thoughts and flashes of every time he said he loved me. What was real and what was fake? I didn't know anymore. As I turned onto the narrow road that led to the cabin, I slowed down. The car was parked out front, his car. The lights were on inside. Shadows moved behind the curtains. I sat there, engine off, hidden in the darkness. My heart pounded so loud I could barely breathe. I wasn't ready to walk in, but I also couldn't turn around. And then, something unexpected happened. Another car pulled up behind me. I panicked for a second, thinking it might be Mark stepping out. But it wasn't. It was someone else entirely. A woman stepped out. Not Rachel. Someone older. Dressed in dark clothes. She didn't see me, her focus was entirely on the cabin. She moved quickly, like she'd been here before, like she knew exactly what she was walking into. I crouched down, trying not to be seen, and watched as she slipped around the back of the house. My mind was spinning. Who was she? What was going on? I waited, frozen, trying to make sense of it. And then I heard shouting. Not from the woman, but from inside the cabin. Voices rising. One was Mark's. The other, definitely Rachel's. I couldn't make out every word, but I caught pieces. You said she didn't know, this wasn't part of the deal, and then, suddenly, silence. I got out of my car, slowly, cautiously. Every step toward the house felt like walking into a storm I couldn't stop. I peeked through the side window. Mark and Rachel were arguing, both tense, and then, there she was. The woman who had arrived just moments ago. Standing in the corner, arms crossed, eyes cold. And in her hand, my wedding photo. She held it up, said something I couldn't hear, and then slammed it down on the table so hard that both of them jumped. My blood ran cold. Who was she? How did she have that photo? And how deep did this betrayal go? In that moment, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This was something bigger. Darker. Something that involved more than just broken vows. And I had just walked right into the middle of it. I stood outside the cabin, barely breathing, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it echoed in the trees around me. I didn't care about hiding anymore. I marched up to the door and pushed it open. It wasn't locked. The room fell silent the second I stepped in. Mark, Rachel, and the older woman all froze, like they'd seen a ghost. For a second, no one spoke. Then Mark took a step toward me. "Wait, this isn't what it looks like," he started, the same line I'd heard in every bad movie. But this wasn't a movie. This was my life, and I'd reached the point where I didn't want any more lies. Rachel looked down, avoiding my eyes completely. She was shaking. I looked at the woman, still holding our wedding photo, and asked the question that had been burning in my mind, "Who are you?" She stared at me for a long moment before finally answering. "I'm Mark's ex-wife." The words hit like a punch. My knees almost buckled. "Ex-wife? You told me you were never married before me," I said to Mark, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. Couldn't, maybe. The silence said more than words ever could. She continued, calmly but firmly. "We were married for 5 years. He left. Disappeared. Took money. Took everything. I spent years trying to track him down, and when I finally did, I found out he had started a new life. With you." My head was spinning. I had no idea what to say. I had thought I was uncovering an affair, but this was something else. A full double life. Lies on top of lies. Rachel finally spoke up, voice cracking. "I didn't know either. He told me you two were separated. That you didn't love him anymore." That's when it clicked. Mark hadn't just been cheating. He had been manipulating both of us, crafting stories, playing the victim, controlling what each of us knew. And this woman, his ex-wife, had come here to expose him once and for all. "You were supposed to protect me," I whispered, looking directly at him. "You promised you'd never hurt me." He tried to speak, but there was nothing left to say. The truth had spoken louder than any excuse ever could. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, the final twist landed like a lightning strike. The woman reached into her bag and pulled out a small stack of papers, legal documents. "He forged your signature," she said, handing them to me. "Took out loans in your name. Everything's in here." My heart shattered all over again. He hadn't just betrayed me emotionally, he had betrayed me financially, legally, completely. I walked out that night without looking back. Everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and marriage had been torn apart in one evening. But that night, as painful as it was, gave me something back, the truth. And it was the beginning of something I never expected, my own strength. The weeks after that night at the cabin were the hardest of my life. I filed for divorce immediately. There was no confrontation, no long conversations, just silence and paperwork. Mark tried calling, texting, even sent flowers. But by then, I was done listening. I had given him everything, and he had used it against me. The betrayal wasn't just about infidelity. It was about trust, deception, and the way he stripped away my sense of safety, piece by piece. Rachel reached out a few days later. She apologized, not just for what happened, but for ignoring the signs. She'd been used too, just like I had. We met for coffee once. It was awkward at first, but in a strange way, we both found comfort in knowing we weren't alone. She was just another person who fell for the same lie, a different version of the same story. As for his ex-wife, her name was Lisa. We kept in touch for a while. She helped me understand just how far Mark's pattern of manipulation went. She'd spent years rebuilding her life after he walked away, and she said something I'll never forget: "He doesn't change. But you can." And she was right. I spent the next few months focusing on myself. I started therapy, took control of my finances, and leaned on my family, something I hadn't done in years. I stopped blaming myself for not seeing it sooner. That's the thing about emotional betrayal, it doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in slowly, wearing the mask of love, until one day you realize you're living in someone else's illusion. This wasn't the life I planned. I didn't picture myself starting over in my 30s, learning to sleep alone again, or rebuilding my trust from the ground up. But looking back, walking away was the most powerful thing I've ever done. So, if you're watching this and you've felt that same gut feeling, that something isn't right, listen to it. You're not crazy. You're not being too emotional. Sometimes the person you love most is the one hurting you the deepest. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself. My husband was supposed to protect me. But instead, he crossed every line I thought was unbreakable. And now, I'm rewriting my story, one truth at a time. 18.